one of America's most prominent families, and a triple murder that shocked the nation. But just who committed the crime? This is the true story of Harley Beard. Our story begins in 1896 in the small community of Franklin, just south of Dayton, Ohio. It's here that Arthur and Elizabeth Beard planted their roots and were raising 8 children. The family lived on a 100-acre farm that was situated in the bottomland that bordered the sandy banks of Clear Creek. Now, the Beard family were your typical hard-working, honest, and God-fearing farmers who were doing their best to scratch out a humble living from the fertile soil, all while thanking the good Lord above for all his abundant blessings. For the family's children, schooling was scarce, and hard work was simply the way of the world. Not that they complained much. Well, how could they? It was the only life they had ever known. From the time they were big enough to carry a bucket or pull a weed, each youngster labored shoulder to shoulder with their parents, from sunup to sundown, doing their part to keep the family fed and the farm running. It was just the way things were back then. A man needed a house full of young'uns to keep up with the never-ending chores. Truth is, a crop of stout, strong children was considered the greatest blessing a wife could give her husband. And Elizabeth Beard, well, she had done her part well by delivering 7 healthy farm hands who grew up tall and tough, able to swing an axe, hoe a field, or wrestle a stubborn mule without tiring. But then came the youngest boy, Harley. From the very beginning, it was clear that he was the runt of the litter. Small-boned and slight of frame, he lacked the size and strength that marked the rest of the boys. He could barely see over the top of a 55-gallon drum, even when standing on his tiptoes. And while his brothers and sisters tackled heavy work without a second thought, Harley was often overlooked. Too little to pull his full weight in the fields or around the barn. And in a world that valued strong backs and calloused hands, the boy simply didn't measure up. Because of his small stature and physical limitations, Harley grew into the quiet type. He kept his innermost thoughts locked tight inside of himself, rarely speaking them out loud. The only place he opened up was a little diary that he kept hidden away, where he poured his heart in pencil scratches across the pages. And here, young Harley would write about the life that he dreamed of, one where he was able to heft an axe with power or work in a field from dawn to dusk without being left behind. More than anything else in this world, what the boy longed for the most was to see the pride in his father's eyes when he looked at him, the same pride that Arthur Beard showed so easily towards all his other boys and girls. But unfortunately, it would never be. Life's got a way of kicking a man when he's down, and so it was for Harley, because when he was just 7 years old, in the bitter winter of 1904, his mama took sick with a raging fever. For 2 long weeks she suffered, fighting with everything she had. But alas, in the end, her earthly body gave out, and her soul passed on to the other side of the great unknown. Elizabeth had been the only one who ever showed the boy that unconditional mother's love. And now, with her gone, Harley's whole world fell apart. By the following spring, Arthur Beard had remarried a widow who brought 3 children of her own into the home where there just wasn't enough room or enough food for everyone under that roof. So Arthur sent little Harley to live in the county children's home. it was only temporary. The father assured his son, as soon as there was more room, he would send for him. So without any ceremony, Harley was shipped off and was now living in a large brick dormitory that resembled a prison full of unwanted kids. Some were orphaned and others had simply been given up, all trying to find their place in a world that had already turned its back on them. Inside those walls, children rose early and ate plain meals of porridge, beans, and cornbread before being put to work. There were floors to scrub, laundry to hang, gardens to tend, and animals to feed. Harley was still small for his age, and he did what he could, but the heavier chores were still often left to the bigger boys. So he spent hours peeling potatoes or sweeping long hallways. The nights were the hardest. In a room filled with rows of narrow iron beds, Harley would lie awake listening to the others sleep, wondering if his father ever thought about him or if he would ever return for him. He still kept his diary, scribbling by lamplight, writing down the ache in his chest. But time stops for no one, and before you knew it, 5 Christmases came and went before Harley finally received the first letter from home. The boy's heart leapt with joy. This was the day he had waited for so long, and he hastily tore the envelope open with trembling hands, only to be crushed by its contents. There on the paper was one single paragraph informing the 13-year-old boy that his father had died. By 1909, Harley Beard was an orphan. His older siblings did what they could to get him out of that children's home, and for a while he lived with his older sister in Chicago before moving in with another sister in southern Ohio. But her husband, well, he took one look at that boy and promptly made arrangements to send him away to work for his elderly father, who lived just north of the West Virginia-Ohio state line in Lawrence County. Now, this area was isolated and rural, with a peculiar blend of oil-rich, muddy soil that was perfect for growing tobacco. And for this reason, many folks referred to the region as Greasy Ridge. Yet, once again, after just one growing season, the elderly farmer had no use for the boy, and he made it known that he would give the boy to any man who was willing to take him. Enter into this story a fella named Robert Massie. Now, Robert came from one of the most prominent families in Greasy Ridge. He owned a beautiful home that he shared with his sister and their mother on a sprawling 600-acre cattle farm. The Massie name was one of power and wealth, and they even had their hand in local politics. His brother was deputy tax commissioner, and Robert himself held the position of county treasurer. Mr. Massie was deeply active in his church and was seen as a respected, charitable man. When word reached him about the slight teenage boy being passed around from farm to farm like an unwanted stray, Robert Massie took pity on him. He hired Harley Beard to work on his place for $5 a week, along with food, a room, and board. To many folks, it looked like a merciful act, a good man giving a struggling boy a chance to finally have steady work and a place to belong. Indeed, the Massie family was good to the teenage boy. They gave him his very own room in the family's home, shared every meal with him, and even took him to the old regular Baptist church services each Sunday. And before long, Harley had fell into a routine of feeding and watering the animals, baling hay, and mending fences the best he could. But as the next couple years passed, something inside him changed. Harley grew more and more reclusive. He spent long stretches of time locked away in his room or out in the barn by himself, lost in his writing and reading. The boy had developed a peculiar and troubling interest in horror literature. Dark tales of murder, blood, and human cruelty that he devoured whenever he could get his hands on it. He began keeping a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings of gruesome crimes that had made their way into the weekly national newspaper that was delivered to the Massie home. Robert's 77-year-old mother, Nancy, well, she didn't care for it one bit. She'd just shake her head and tell him flat out that such foolishness was a waste of time. That boy's time would be better spent reading the New Testament, she'd say each time the subject came up. And the Massies, being good Christian people, well, they made sure that Harley attended youth group meetings down at that church. After all, it'd be good for him and help him get his mind right. But what they didn't know was that as soon as Harley arrived, he would slip away into the thick forest that surrounded the church. Now, it was clear Harley was different. Perhaps a childhood of rejection had permanently tainted him. But whatever it was, slowly and steadily, a black void seemed to be opening just beneath the surface. A darkness that the kind-hearted Massies never fully saw, but never in their wildest nightmares could they have imagined what this quiet young man was truly capable of. Because what happens next would shake this small community to its core and explode into one of the most sensational and horrifying crimes in American history.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today, also available on Amazon.
It all began on the morning of Friday, May 14th, 1914. You see, a man named John Clary lived next door to the Massie estate, and as he sipped on his morning coffee, he looked out at the sun that was slowly rising over the Massie cattle in the fields. Those animals were unsettled and restless. In fact, they had kept John up all night. It sure was peculiar, and it seemed like they hadn't been watered or fed recently. Now, this was highly unusual, since Robert Massie, well, he wasn't the type of man to neglect his animals. John decided to walk over to the Massie home and check on his neighbors. And no sooner than he entered the gate, an eerie feeling washed over him. Normally, the homestead would be buzzing with activity, but there was nothing except the family dog who was pacing back and forth in front of the house. And the dog kept walking to the side of the house where the kitchen was, and then the animal would look back over his shoulder to see if Mr. Clary was following him. "What is it, boy? What are you trying to tell me?" John called out. But the dog, he only whined and once again walked towards the side of the house, but this time with John cautiously following behind. And as the neighbor approached, he noticed the kitchen door was open and the screen door was creaking back and forth in the slightest breeze. But before he could look inside, something else caught his eye. Just beyond the back gate leading to the fields, there was a huge buzzard perched on top of something. "What in the world is that?" John said as he walked closer to get a better look, and to his horror, he realized it was John Massie, who was laying face down in the dirt. The back of his skull had been crushed some time ago, and now the buzzard was eating the flesh off of his face. Terrified, Mr. Clary ran away from the scene as fast as he could while yelling for help. Minutes later, John had fetched his rifle and returned along with several neighbors who were locked and loaded just in case the killer was still on the premises. And after covering Mr. Massie's body, the men turned their eyes towards that creaking screen door and slowly opened it with their rifles raised. And to their horror, the entire kitchen was covered in blood. And there on the floor was Robert Massie's 47-year-old sister, Mary, with her hands tied and her face frozen and her eyes still looking towards the ceiling. Just a few feet away in the dining room was their 78-year-old mother, also laying in a pool of blood. Both women's skulls were crushed and their throats had been cut. The men continued walking into the house of horrors. Where was Harley? Had he been killed too? Down the dark hallway they went, towards his room. His door was closed, and everyone braced themselves for what may wait on the other side. John Clary slowly pushed it open. There were blood-soaked clothes strewn on the bed, along with a bloody razor blade. But Harley Beard was nowhere to be found. Had he really committed this terrible triple murder? And if so, why? Within hours, the law was swarming at the Massie estate. It didn't take long for him to notice that something was missing. Robert Massie was known to carry a fine gold watch, and he kept a couple $1,000s or more locked away in his safe. Both were gone, and so was Mary Massie's horse. It was nowhere to be found. The killer had clearly used it to make his escape under the cover of darkness. And as the investigation heated up, word spread fast about a suspicious young man seen several miles away at the train depot the day before the bodies were discovered. He was dressed in a fancy suit, and several eyewitnesses swore that it was the boy that worked for the Massies. He had purchased a ticket straight to his sister's house in Chicago and boarded the train heading north. All the pieces were already starting to fall into place, and the name on everybody's lips was the same: Harley Beard. News of the triple murder spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across newspapers all over America. The brutal slaying of one of Southern Ohio's most prominent families had the entire country talking. And right there on the front pages was the face of 18-year-old Harley Beard, now the most wanted man in America. Ohio authorities wasted no time. They wired the Chicago police with a description and a warning. And by Friday night, just 12 hours after the bodies were discovered, detectives were standing on the doorstep of Viola Beard's home in Chicago. When the woman answered the door, she had no idea why the police were there. And being a polite woman, she invited them inside and headed straight to the kitchen to put on a pot of tea. Harley sat stone-faced on the living room couch, and as the detectives approached, the boy reached into his pocket and pulled out Robert Massie's gold watch. And without a flicker of remorse, he simply said, "Yeah, I did it." But as for why he had slaughtered the family, the detectives would have to wait. He refused to say another word until he had his day in court. Over the next couple of days, he was extradited back to Southern Ohio under heavy guard. Meanwhile, the Massie family was laid to rest on the hills in Greasy Ridge that were covered with people. Every road leading into Lawrence County was clogged with traffic, as over 3,500 people came from all across the region to pay their respects. The three caskets sat side by side at the family's Baptist church, and there, Robert, Mary, and Nancy were buried together in a family plot. The mood was heavy with grief and anger, and even during the funeral service, you could hear menfolk muttering about revenge. An eye for an eye, they said. The talk of lynching Harley Beard grew so loud that even the preacher had to stop and plead with the men, begging them not to take matters in their own hands and let the justice system do its work. Harley Beard was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, and in a strategic move, the prosecution decided to try each count separately. They were confident that they would get a death penalty conviction on the first case. But if they didn't, they would try him again on the second or even the third count. They were willing to do whatever it took. Still, the question that hovered over the entire case was, why had this youngster done it? The trial date was set for June 15th, just 1 month after the tragedy, in a courthouse that was packed to the rafters as Harley Beard was set to take the stand. It was the first time in the history of Lawrence County that a man had voluntarily pled guilty to a murder charge. And the only question now was, would it be life in prison or the death penalty? And it all seemed that it would hinge on Harley's testimony. When he took the stand, here are the remarks he made, word for word, as he spoke that day. Your Honor, everything I'm about to say is the gospel truth. I have no reason to lie. I've already admitted my guilt, and I only offer this confession so that you might understand my actions. You see, I started to work for Robert Massie a couple of years ago, and I worked every season with him, and I did my best to get along with him. Now, despite their reputation as a good Christian family, behind closed doors, well, that wasn't the case. The truth is, on the whole, well, they treated me rather roughly. I mean, I got along with the mother and the daughter well enough, but Bob, he kept fighting with me, especially the week leading up to the murder. It all started Monday morning when I hitched up the horse and wagon for him. He was going to town to buy some furniture, and after he left, I returned to my room, and I swear afore God, Mary followed me into my room, and when I ordered her out, we quarreled. Then her mama came and scolded me, and when I tried to answer back that I wasn't at fault, she wouldn't listen. Bob got home about 11 o'clock that night, and Mary lied to him and told him that I had came into her room. And the next morning, as I was helping Bob in the hayfield, I could tell he was upset. And while I was bent over cutting a piece of rope, I felt the side of his axe pressed against the side of my face. And then he said, "If you ever bother my sister again, I'll cut your damn head off." I told him I never touched his sister, but this only made him madder. He had a rage in his eye, and then he raised the axe. I swear, I thought he was going to kill me in that very moment. I had a long stake in my hand that I'd been using to bale hay. It had a heavy metal ring on one end, and without even thinking, I swung it, and I hit him and it busted his head in. I immediately ran into the kitchen. Mary had watched the whole thing from the window, and when she saw her brother on the ground, she started screaming and jumped at me. So I hit her in the head. She fell down, and I tied her hands up so she couldn't get to the phone. Then the old lady got up from the table and came in, so I hit her too. It all happened so fast, I don't know what came over me. I blacked out, I tell you, and there was an uncontrollable ringing in my ears. And when I finally came to, all I could hear was both women moaning in pain. I couldn't take the sound, so I took a razor out of my pocket and I cut their throats. I got changed and I rode Mary's horse 8 miles to the train station. But I swear afore God, I'd stopped twice to water the animal because I didn't want to be cruel to it. My hand before God, that's what happened. All I ask is for mercy. Whatever little sympathy Harley's testimony may have stirred in the hearts of those who listened, all evaporated in his last sentence of not wanting to be cruel to a horse after he had just murdered 3 people. The courtroom erupted in chaos as Robert Massie's brother charged the witness stand and had to be wrestled to the ground by 3 sheriff deputies. When order was finally restored, Harley Beard was sentenced to death, and on December 3rd, 1914, he became one of the youngest men in Ohio history to die in the electric chair. I'd like to leave you with this final question. We may never truly know exactly what happened on that fateful day when Robert, Mary, and Nancy Massie met their demise. Could it be that the family who had taken Harley in and gave him a home were also abusing him behind closed doors? Or did Harley make that entire story up? Could it be that a childhood of abandonment finally caused Harley Beard to snap and release the monster that lived inside of him? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below.